Alright, welcome readers. I'm Pete Altieri, and this is the first video address I've ever done as a writer, and thought you guys might find it interesting to hear the answers to some of the questions that I've been getting about my new book, The Dreadful Lives of Enoch Strange, as well as some of the stories that were in the Creation of Chaos Volume 1 short story collection from last year. So I just kind of opened it up to whoever wanted to shoot me some questions, and I just picked the top 12. I think there's 12 of them. Yeah, there's 12 questions, so I'm just going to kind of read them off and answer them. So some of them will be shorter answers and some might be a little bit longer. I'm not sure how long this video will be. We're just going to kind of go with it since it's the first time. So hope you dig it, and comment below and let me know what you think, and let others know what you think if you found it beneficial to sit there and check out. Alright, well, first question, how did you come up with the name The Dreadful Lives of Enoch Strange? That's a very good question. That book, the novel that just came out October 5th of 2018 on Blunt Force Press, that was a long time coming. If you got the book in the afterword, I get into some of that, quite a bit of it actually, of how it became, you know, what it is, which is the novel. Originally, back in 2006, I believe, my former band, Low 12, had come out with an album called This Side Toward Enemy. And it was a story, the album told a story, and we wrote music, obviously, to the story that I came up with about Nolan Weeks and about the 12 killers inside of him. And, you know, the lyrics can only go so deep. I really liked the story, though. Went ahead and wrote a novella, a short novel, and was originally thought it might be a graphic novel, but wound up not working out that way. Nonetheless, you know, after the album came out, you know, we moved on to other stuff, other writing, and so I can only do so much at once, and so the This Side Toward Enemy novella just kind of sat there, unfortunately. Well, years later, back in, I think it was 2016, when I finished my book 6, that one has not been published, but when I finished it, I was talking to my beta reader, Chris Kovacs, about, you know, what's the next project, and, you know, just kind of talking in general terms. I had somehow got into the fact that I had written This Side Toward Enemy, the novella, and Chris wanted to read it. And so I sent it to him, and he loved it. He really liked it. I hadn't read it in a very long time. It had been about 10 years since the Low 12 album had come out. So I really hadn't looked at it in a long time, and I did too, and I really thought it was good. Found a lot of things I would have rewritten. You know, obviously a more mature writer now than I was then. But overall, I thought it was great, and the storyline I always loved. So the problem with it is that it was only about 40,000 or so words, and most novels are at least 80, at least in the horror genre. You know, basic fiction, 80 to 100,000 is usually about a first novel length. And so I thought, well, you know, that's obviously not enough. So I need to write something, you know, more than that. So I debated whether to just rewrite it and just add a lot more to it, or do something that I thought might be interesting, which was I had a prequel to This Side Toward Enemy in mind, which at one time Low 12 had debated doing that or another idea, and we wound up all voting for the other idea, and so we never did the prequel. But that prequel is the book 1 or part 1 of The Dreadful Lives of Enoch Strange, and part 2 is This Side Toward Enemy. And so the two of them tell the story, but the Enoch Strange part is interesting, and I don't want to do any spoilers for those of you that haven't read it yet, but he's a very pivotal character in the story but ironically, he's not in the story very much. But when he is, it's a big deal. And so without divulging or giving away anything to spoil, all I could say is he's such a pivotal character that I felt it necessary to call the book or name the book with his name in the title. And the whole lives part of it is an interesting twist to the Enoch Strange character, because he's not a man and he's not an animal. He's like something in between. He's very strange, very hideous creature, being, whatever you want to call him. But basically, what Enoch is he's like a living prison. And there are characters in the story that are very bad and do really, really evil things. And there has been occasions for someone like that to be cast inside of Enoch Strange as like a living prison, and having to be inside that disgusting body and for eternity or a very long time until they can figure out how to get out. And that's really what the story kind of hinges on, is Enoch. But he's a rather small character, but a very large character at the same time. So I hope that answers your question, and appreciate that. Was a really good one. I thought it would be good to start out with that question only because the book just came out, and I thought some people might be interested in hearing that, wanting to check out the novel. So, next question. In your book, The Dreadful Lives of Enoch Strange, is the abbot based on a real person? That's a very good question also. The answer is no. I do have a friend that works at a Catholic school church, kind of like in the book that I use, St. Michael's. It's not called that, but it's like that, very similar. And he was very helpful in answering questions I had about the hierarchy in a setting like that. And he was very instrumental in knowing how it worked with the abbot and the prior and the sub-prior and all those things that you read in part 1 of the book. And so the abbot, to me is by far my favorite character. I've mentioned that before in the afterword, that I love that character only because he's so evil and so bad that he just dominates every scene that he's in. I mean, there is no way for the abbot to be in a room and not be the center of attention. He is diabolical, and I really enjoy putting him in situations and just seeing what havoc comes of it. So I thought that he's just such a bad man that he just came out of whole cloth. He's just an invention, not based anything at all in reality that I'm aware of, that's for sure. All right, next question. Is it true that part of the Enoch Strange book was from the Low 12 album? Well, I kind of answered that. Yes, This Side Toward Enemy was the Low 12 album. It did come out on Rotting Corpse Records that I don't believe exists anymore. You can find copies of it on eBay. I've seen many of them out there. I don't have any of them anymore. It's out of print, and we are not authorized under the agreement we had with the label to duplicate them. So it's out there, but you have to dig for them on eBay and that sort of thing. So it says, the next question, use lots of symbolism in your writing. What was the number of, or was the number of nuns used in Enoch Strange intentional, and why? That is a very good question. Yes, it is symbolic. Obviously, the 12 nuns, symbolic of the 12 apostles. The number 12 is a very interesting number if you're into numerology. I'm really not, but I do find it an interesting topic. And so, yeah, the 12 was very symbolic for those reasons. And then introducing the 13th nun. that was what kind of tweaked it. Again, I don't want to do any spoilers here, but if you read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Those two powerful entities clashing and just fighting over the fact that the ritual had been changed, and the piousness of somebody changing this ancient ritual was the cause of a very intense conflict between those two very, very charismatic, albeit for bad reasons, characters. So yeah, that's basically what the deal was with that. So lots of symbolism. I do like to use symbolism quite a bit, which kind of ties into this next question. It says, I loved your story, The Jesus Tree, and I think it's really cool that it was a real tree. So, based on a true story about that tree, and that is correct. And it says, the question is, did you hang out there as a teenager? And if so, were there any weird experiences that made you want to write the story? That's a really great question. Because yes, if you haven't read The Jesus Tree, you can read it for free if you go to Wattpad, WATTPAD.com, and search my name, and you'll find it. I've got about a dozen of my short stories on there that you can read. And so, feel free to check it out, because Jesus Tree is on there. And I did go there a couple of times as a teenager. Actually, when I was up there, typical Friday night after a football game or something, a lot of kids would go out there and hang out. Some kids were drinking. And so, you had cops out there all the time, at least when I was of age to go up there. So I kind of stayed away from it, to be honest with you. I did, when I was up there the very first time, was very interested to see, does this tree actually look like Jesus, or do I see any similarities? And you really have to get back a little far, and it did look somewhat like Jesus on the cross. But when you're drinking beer on a Friday night and you're standing in this dark road, it's very creepy too. Your mind plays tricks, and you see what you want to see, type of thing. So I don't really know. I always thought it was a very interesting story about the tree. And also tying in with that last question, there were 12 trees, 6 on each side, that were symbolic of the 12 apostles. And that's kind of what I used for my story, the short story, The Jesus Tree, which was actually published in my Creation of Chaos short story collection. So there's a couple of different ways you could check out The Jesus Tree, but yeah, I mean, I think it was neat too that that was a real tree. It's been cut down for many, many years, and the main reason was the property owner just didn't want all these people out there. They had a few accidents too, because it was kind of a winding country road. And there had been a couple of, I think, a fatality, if I'm not mistaken, in that area. Somebody broke down on the side of the road. It was just not a good place to go. Like I said, a lot of cops out there and stuff. So when I was of age to go up there, I stayed away. So no creepy story, but I just thought the idea of a Jesus tree was interesting, because I thought, well, why would you name it? Because everybody called it that, obviously, because it kind of looked like Jesus. But I took that idea and just went nuts with it in a completely different direction, in a story that I completely made up, only in that the tree was the only thing that was based in actual reality. So, great question, though. I love that story. I enjoyed writing it. The Man with Spots was such an awesome story, and it's even better that you based it on a childhood fear that you had. Can you elaborate on that? Yeah, I mean, The Man with Spots, again, at the end of the Creation of Chaos book, like I did with Enoch Strange, I have an afterword where I explain, where do these stories come from? I always think that's interesting to hear from an author or a filmmaker, or anybody that's doing that sort of thing, of what made you write that. What made you create that? What was the inspiration? Was it a real event? Did you just totally make it up? I kind of tend to take little bits of reality and twist them into what I need them to be to make an interesting story. Some need more twisting than others, but usually there's some twisting and wrenching involved. Now, the man with spots was a childhood fear I had when I lived in the Bronx with my parents and my little sister in an apartment, and I was had a lot of fears as a child, didn't sleep well, and my parents told me a few times about me being little. I was like 5 or 6, and telling them that I was having nightmares, and they would ask me, what am I having nightmares about? And I would say it was the man with spots. And of course that sounds kind of freaky and a little ominous, and so that kind of bothered them. And years later, when the internet came about, I searched for the man with spots to try to find out if it was a real thing, a real something maybe I saw on TV as a little kid. I used to love Spider-Man, the cartoon at the time, which would have been the early 70s. And I searched Spider-Man villains, and I don't see anything even remotely close to what maybe I would have called a man with spots. So kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, it is based on a true childhood fear. Fortunately, the man with spots does not haunt me anymore. However, I am contemplating putting him in as a cameo in my next novel. So you just might see the man with spots again. And I'm also thinking possibly the Abbot might be good for a cameo in the next one. So we'll see. All right, next question. You've mentioned the illustrated novel Deeper Than Dead in your podcast a few times. How is that coming along, and when will it be published? Deeper Than Dead is an exciting new project that I'm working on with artist Brian Usual. Brian did an interview on my podcast, Murder Metal Mayhem. If you missed it, you can go on murdermetalmayhem.com and search for it and check that out. It was a couple of weeks ago that we did the interview with Brian, so I think first week of October. So check it out. But we talk about Deeper Than Dead in that interview. Brian's going to be doing an illustration for each chapter or part. There's going to be 10 parts. So it'll be an illustrated novel, like a full art piece for each of the 10 parts. He's also going to, of course, do the cover art. And then we're also talking about doing a full-size poster instead of the smaller 11 by 17s that I've done before, and make it a full-size poster and incorporate all the 10 pieces, the cover, and everything into one art piece, which will be friggin' amazing. Brian is such a talented artist, and I really enjoy working with him. As you can see behind me, some of the artwork, you can see the Enoch Strange cover and the Creation of Chaos cover off of my shoulder. Brian is just a super talented guy, and the Deeper Than Dead story, I'm really excited about it. The first part, 99 Steps, is also on Wattpad. I mentioned that before. If you want to read it, that's part 1 that I've published for free on Wattpad. The rest will not be up there, but that one at least is, and you could check it out and see if you like the storyline. But I'm really excited about it. Brian and I are both excited about it. We're starting to get back into it again. It took a little back burner as some of this other Enoch Strange promotional and publication stuff was going on. But now that that's done and out, and I can kind of focus back on Deeper Than Dead and get the parts written so Brian can work on the art. He's actually already started the art because he's got my outline, but he's going to read each part as it goes and kind of fine-tune what he's doing, and it should be really exciting. As for when it's going to be out, we're hoping summer 2019. But again, it's hard to say. These things sometimes slow down. Life happens. People have situations come up. The best I could say is that's our goal. I'd like to have it out by the summer, but it might be in the summer. Just hard to say. But it's going to be a full-size book with art inside. It's going to be really wicked. I think you guys will really, really dig it. It's going to be something totally different than I've done before. And Brian and I are working together on that one. All right. It says, are you already writing another novel? If so, can you share anything about it? Now that I've read Enoch Strange, I can't wait. Well, thank you very much. That's kind to say. I'm glad you liked the novel. I enjoyed it, writing it, even though it took... These things take a really long time, especially when that's not what I do for a living. I still have a day job, and so writing is a part-time thing. I can't, devote, hours upon hours a day, and so it takes a long time to get things done. And I have, a very small staff of people that I work with. I've mentioned Chris Kovacs, my beta reader, before, and my line editor, proofreader, JBS. Those are the only two people that I've got helping me in the process. So and all the promotional things, I got to do all on my own website, all of that stuff. So it's really tough to do all those things, especially now that I'm doing the podcast. But we're talking about the writing on the podcast, so I think the podcast is a positive thing, but it does take time, obviously. So trying. I do not want to reveal much about the new book, but there will be, it's going to be a step up from Enoch Strange. It's going to be a bigger stage, spanning centuries, which is going to be very, very challenging. I'm really excited about it. I will tell you right now, the working title is one word. I have written a short story that is basically the first chapter to kind of get my palate a little, or my, taste buds sparked a little bit to see if I dig it. And I really did like the way that came out. And so I feel good about the story. I think it'll be really excellent, and as soon as I have the time to work on it, once Deeper Than Dead writing is done, probably spring, I'll start it. So that means, at least a year from then, probably a year and a half. It takes a lot of time to do it. Enoch Strange took, from beginning to end, probably about 2 years. But part of that was because my wife died in 2017, and that really affected me, obviously. 27 years of being married, an abrupt death in a car accident. So that really shook me to the core. I was done writing. I think I was doing the final edits when it happened. So thankfully the writing was done, and just editing needed to be cleaned up a bit. So... it didn't take me away for too long, but it took me long enough, and other projects I was working on, that it did slow things down. But thankfully it's out, and you guys have it. But as soon as I can divulge more on the next one, I'll be posting it in all the usual places. So keep your eyes open for that. So many of your writings would be amazing on the screen. Are there any plans for a movie or even a short? I wish. No, there is not any talk of any of that. Hopefully somebody will be interested in reading the Enoch Strange book and maybe think about doing something. That'd be amazing. I would love to be a part of that. But sometimes the writer doesn't. Sometimes the writer sells the rights, and then they have nothing to say about it. It's made. And of course you can negotiate these things, and that's what an agent is there to do. But currently I do not have an agent. I am my own agent right now. It's all DIY. So right now I don't have anything in the works, but that would be really nice. I have had a couple of people interested in shorts. I did sell a short story I wrote called The October House to American Horrors up in Wisconsin. Hart Fisher's the guy behind that. He's very, very big in the underground horror industry. He's a really good guy, and he purchased the rights to use it for something, so we'll see if he winds up, maybe doing something like that. A short would be awesome. I love that storyline as well. If he doesn't wind up using it by the time my next short story book comes out, I'm going to put it in the next one because I really do like it. I wanted to put it in the first one, but under agreement that I was under with American Horrors, I'm not allowed to publish it, so it's not available anywhere through me, and it won't be until that agreement ends. So that's how that works. Can you name something odd about you that your readers might not know? Oh my God. Do you have a couple of days to sit here and listen to the oddities that are me? I have a bunch of them. Probably a little OCD. I have some weird things. Anybody that knows me really well, my kids, my grandkids, and my close family and friends, know that I'm really weird about stuff in the fridge. Like, I get like squeamish about like leftovers. Don't like leftovers. Certain things I'll eat, but certain things I won't left over. Milk, I'm not a milk drinker. I only use it like for cereal or like cooking or something. And so I don't like the milk being open for more than a couple of days. I'll throw it away. It just makes me just gag, even though I'm sure it's fine. But I had some bad experiences in my youth with roommates that left nasty stuff in the refrigerator, and I don't want to see any of that anymore. And so maybe that's why, but now that I'm 51, you would think I'd be over it, but I'm not. So that's probably one of the good ones. There's a bunch of them. I mean, I think everybody could name weird things that they do or like or whatever, but that's definitely one. The food phobia. I'm not into like cookouts. If there's anything like mayonnaise, like potato salad stuff, not going to touch it. To me, I'm just thinking I'm going to get sick. It's just been set out in the sun, those types of things. So I'm somewhat picky when it comes to certain types of food, more so on that it might be spoiled than anything. So that's probably weird enough to answer your question. So thank you. But like I said, I could probably sit here for a good hour or two talking about all the weird things about me. Okay, next question. I love your podcast, and I think it's cool that a writer of horror stories who loves heavy metal. How intertwined are those things in your life? Well, first of all, thanks about the podcast, Murder Metal Mayhem. I've been doing it now with my co-host, Chris Shawback, since April of 2018. We're approaching our 30th show here in a couple weeks, so we're doing really well with it. And I mean, I love metal. I have since, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old. I've always listened to it. I don't really like any other kinds of music. I'm pretty close-minded in that regard. And even within the metal genre, I'm somewhat picky. I do like thrash. I like some death metal. I like some of the grindcore stuff, but not a lot of it. It's just a little bit, the vocals, I'm not a big fan of some of them. But like I said, I'm somewhat picky there. But I do love the aggression and the subject matter that they write about. I like some of the old school stuff like Judas Priest and Maiden, of course Black Sabbath. King Diamond I love, Merciful Fate, Venom. So kind of a wide range, the thrash stuff, Exodus, the old Metallica, the old Megadeth, Slayer, of course. Any of those, thrash bands, Creator, Destruction, Sodom. I mean, I love all these, thrash bands. So, I mean, it's a big part of my life. I listen to it a lot. So doing the podcast is cool because it does take my love of true crime and serial killers and all that sort of weird stuff and the metal and then throwing in some good mayhem stories, funny stories from touring, and just all the crazy stuff that me and my friends have seen out there at metal shows, and just living life and just doing crazy stuff. So we do it all. And if you haven't heard it, like I said, go to murdermetalmayhem.com or go to your podcast platform that you like to use. I like Castbox myself, but there's a bunch of them out there, and you can check it out and search for it on there. You'll find it. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, and we do a lot of interesting topics. I think you guys will dig it. But yeah, it kind of intertwines all those things in my life that I like into one thing. And we do talk about my writing. We have talked about the Enoch Strange book. Like I mentioned earlier, I did the interview with Brian. So there's a lot of stuff on there you can check out. And the last question is, what book are you reading right now? Well, I normally am just a one book kind of guy at a time. I have a hard time focusing on too many books at once. I know some people can do it. I'm just not a big fan. But I am reading a book by Harold Schechter, who's one of my favorite true crime authors, called Hell's Princess, and it's about Belle Gunness, a really sadistic serial killer from the early 1900s, I believe. She's just absolutely brutal. And I think that, or actually late 1800s, I correct myself. But she is just really brutal, killed like 30, 40 people. And we're talking about maybe doing her as a feature on the podcast coming up sometime. So it sounded interesting. Like I said, I love Harold Schechter's books. He's got so many of them. If you're into serial killers and stuff like that, his books are among the best. So I definitely recommend Harold Schechter. But that's the book I'm reading right now. I am also reading some H.P. Lovecraft stories because our next feature on the podcast is H.P. Lovecraft. So I'm doing some legwork and show prep for the podcast and doing a little H.P. Lovecraft. So I'm mixing the two. I normally don't do that, but this week I have to keep up with everything. So that's what I'm reading right now. And again, thank you guys for all the questions, everybody that participated. I do appreciate it. And if you're interested in any of my books, you can go to PeteAltieri.com. You can buy the books right from there. You can get them Kindle if that's your thing. You can do that through Amazon if you want the books that way. You can get either one that way. And I've got a Facebook page, of course. I've got a Twitter account. So, go like that and all that good stuff. Comment. And, keep the questions coming in, and I'll do more of these if you guys dig it. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.